This is the secret knowledge that separates the serious investors, the pro investors, and the amateur investors. And that's knowing the property cycle. And you must be asking, well, Q, how does the property cycle work? Let's go, noobs. Let's learn. Hitting my drawing board, let's call this the property cycle diagram. Split it into 4 quadrants over here, as you can see. And to our left, I put down the boom quadrant, and then the downturn quadrant, which is to the right. And underneath is the stabilization quadrant and the upturn quadrant. And at the top of this is the peak, baby. And the opposite effect is the bottom. And the number one truth that you need to know about the property universe, which I call the Dharma of property, Dharma stands for truth in Sanskrit, which is a Buddhist term, is that like the women's menstrual cycle, property moves in cycles. For example, from boom to downturn to stabilization and upturn. It never stays permanently in one position, because like the Buddhist term of Dharma, life is impermanent. Now, before I jump deeper into the rabbit hole of the Dharma of the property cycle, let's look at what the boom consists of. And just like Guile's sonic boom, and yes, that's an inside joke with us millennials out there, while you Gen Zs continue playing Fortnite. There are 3 types of sonic booms. I call it the start boom, the mid boom, and the end boom. Let's spend the night together. Sorry, millennial nostalgia. I can't help it. Okay, back to being serious. So the boom phase, out of the 4 quadrants, it's the shortest phase. It's the quickest phase because it goes through a rapid rise where there's a high demand and low supply. It's a seller's market, and it happens when rates are low, as you experienced during COVID, right? Property prices went through the bloody roof. There's more demand for houses. Limited supply, bunch of buyers want to jump into the market. That was the start of the boom. And what happens is we have a mid boom, which is FOMO. You know, a lot of people are like, oh my God, all these people buying properties at this price, it's going high and high. I don't want to miss out. Then a bunch of noobs, you know, those newbie investors will jump in. Right now, they complain about the mortgage cliff. Oh, you know, I got home loans at 1.9. I didn't know this. Now I'm going bankrupt, blah, blah, blah. So that was a mid boom. They got FOMO, right? And the end of the boom is when RBA jacks up the rates, what we're experiencing right now. And then we're experiencing inflation because property prices are overinflated. Now, the next door neighbor to the boom is the downturn. So the key features of the downturn is that there's excess supply, too much on the market, and prices stop to increase. And this is the longest phase out of the 4 quadrants. So for example, if the boom lasts for 12 months, the minimum downturn phase, the period is you just do it by 3x. So if it's 12 months, it'll be at least minimum 36 months to be experienced in this downturn quadrant. In my experience right now, we're not going through a downturn. I reckon we're still in the boom phase because a lot of immigration, the demand for property is really high and limited supply due to, you know, factors of cost and construction. And just like our distant cousin of the boom quadrant, we have 3 types of slumps of the downturn. We have the start slump, mid slump, and the end slump. And just to be brief on each of these slumps, the start slump is when it's cheaper to rent than to buy. Not at this moment, especially in Sydney. Then the mid slump is when auction rates are low. Not happening right now, for sure. And the end slump is when the RBA starts cutting rates. Not at all at this moment, because the RBA is increasing rates to stop people bloody buying. And while this lasts for maybe about 2 to 3 years, as the RBA kicks up in terms of reducing rates, the market starts to stabilize. So basically, buyers are just waiting. Maybe there are more rate cuts. Maybe there are more stock in the market. And developers start to offer discounts on the property. So we go through a correction. And then prices start to fall. A clear example of a stabilization is when, you know, property prices were going through the roof during COVID. The government came in, the RBA, not the government, came in with 12 interest rate cuts. So we saw properties going through a correction, right? Whilst there is a demand for property, the RBA was like, no, bam, 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 bam. So we saw a slight correction, which I call a stabilization. But at the moment with the hold, I think we're entering the upturn segment, which is described as the RBA pauses rates, which we have experienced for the last 3 to 4 months, and there's hints that inflation is lowering, and then there's a potential rate cut, and therefore FOMO kicks in and go, ooh, I better catch the boom before it peaks over to the downturn. And like the 3 other quadrants, there's also 3 phases of the upturn. For example, the start upturn, mid upturn, and end upturn. So with the start of the upturn, what we're seeing is rents rising as an element of a start of upturn, which we're witnessing right now. And for the mid upturn is that building prices are rising, as you see a lot of tradies are charging 2 to 3 times more than what they were costing before in terms of using them. In terms of the end of upturn, we see property prices increasing again. We went through a correction as we saw in the last 12 months. Now we're seeing property prices going crazy. But if you think this is crazy, this is just a start of the upturn uprising, because rates are not being cut yet. By the time the RBA tells people, hey, we're going to cut rates, and then the assessment rate gets lowered from 9.5, for example, 3% lower to maybe 7 to 6%, more lending in the market, the boom will come. 99% of you noob investors will miss out the boom is because you do not know the dharma of the property cycle. And hopefully by me explaining the different characteristics of each quadrant, you're not so reliant on the media to tell you what cycle we're in. Remember guys, the media has a delay and lag in terms of reporting information. For example, by the time they report about the downturn, we're in the stabilization phase. By the time they report about the stabilization phase, we're in the upturn. And then so etc. When they're reporting about the upturn, we're in the bloody boom. And by the time they report about the bloody boom, we're in a downturn. That is why most of my clients, investor clients, are getting a pre-approval now, especially when lending is hard, rates are high, because they're getting themselves ready to enter the start of the upturn, where we're nearing the edge of the stabilization, so that they could ride the wave onto the peak. Because by the time you ride it on the boom, it's too late, guys. It's like for you guys, you want to do jiggy jiggy with your wife tonight, your wife will be like, I'm sorry, you got the wrong menstrual cycle. I got my period. And yes, guys, it's a very vulgar analogy, metaphor, but it does the job, because right now, yes, the rates are high. Just like women's menstrual cycle, you'll be bleeding along the way of the upturn. But then in terms of the high rates, and in terms of, the repayments that you have to pay during this phase of the upturn, you'll be getting the rewards in the boom when your property growth has like quadruple at the peak, yo. Obviously, don't try to go and bang your wife while she has her periods. That's kind of eek. So to quote Venga boys, I want a double boom. Do you want a double boom? Jump in the comments and let me know what you